Hey everyone, Bill Lethman here for MoneyEvolution.com, and welcome back to another one of our live daily videos. So once again, if you are watching our video, if you like what we're doing here, if you think that there's friends that you also think may benefit from some of the stuff that we're doing, please give us a like or a share on Facebook. And if you want to check out some of our resources, head over to MoneyEvolution.com. We've got a resources section there that has a whole bunch of downloads that cover a lot of the topics that we go over in some of these videos. So the topic for today, I'm going to be talking about cash flow, and that's something that I've talked about in a few other videos. I think it's been a little while, but I wanted to address it again today. I wanted to make sure that all of you understood cash flow. I think it's one of the most important financial measures that you can do as an individual in terms of helping you advance within your wealth and your goals for retirement and for everyday living. So I think it's one of the most important things, and it's what our financial plan that we do for clients is really centered around. It's centered around that cash flow. But what I also want to do is I want to talk a little bit about how that cash flow influences other things like your balance sheets. We're going to talk about that a little bit, and I'm going to talk about some of the components that goes into this. And this is probably going to be a theme that we're going to do throughout the rest of the week here. So look out for some more videos tomorrow and throughout the next couple of days that we're going to be talking about some more cash flow issues. So let's get into this. What is cash flow, first of all? Well, cash flow, very simply, is your income minus your expenses equals your cash flow. And hopefully that's positive, but for some of you it may be negative, and for some of you it may be negative and you may not necessarily even realize that it's negative. And I'm going to show you why I think that could potentially be the case. So this cash flow is obviously going to influence your balance sheet. And if we look at or think about a balance sheet as an example, and most people think of balance sheets as a company, but as individuals, of course, we have a balance sheet as well. And very simply, your balance sheet is going to be your assets minus your liabilities, and that equals your net worth. So let's think about this for a moment in the context of cash flow. So if your cash flow is positive, that means that you can, you can add money to your assets. You're going to put money in your savings accounts, build up an emergency fund, cash reserves, or maybe you're putting money into a retirement plan like an IRA account or a 401k plan at work. So if your cash flow is positive, you're going to use up and build up assets. If your cash flow is negative, one of two things is going to happen, and this is why some people may not necessarily realize. So if your cash flow is negative, if those expenses are more than your income coming in, that means you need to either sell some assets, or maybe just simply write a check out of your savings account. Maybe you don't have to really think about it, or a direct deposit or direct debit from your account would happen. Sell assets, or you're going to incur liabilities. Those liabilities are going to go up. And so if we think for a moment about what our average monthly expenses are, we have things like our utility bills, our mortgage payments, maybe some insurance payments that we have. And for many of us, we probably have a pretty good idea of what most of our month-to-month expenses are. We also probably have a pretty good idea of what our income is. Most of you watching this probably have a job or some kind of a regular stream of income. Some people that may be commission-based or may get a lot of overtime or might be self-employed might have more variability with income, but most of us have a pretty good idea of what your income is going to be. So when we look at this, we say, we've got a certain amount of money coming in every month and we have a certain amount of expenses. But if we think about our households that we operate, there's a lot of expenses that may be extra things that don't incur every month. Maybe things like property taxes are one of those things that maybe comes up once or twice a year and is a very big bill. So we end up in this cash flow positive situation. We start building up some assets over here, but then that property tax bill comes and now we've got to take a bunch of money out of our savings account to cover that, or we decide to remodel the kitchen or the bathroom, and then again again, that's probably not covered with your monthly cash flow that you have. It's coming out of some assets, or hopefully not, but for some people, it may mean that you're racking up some liabilities. Maybe if your cash flow is off, you're putting more money on credit cards or incurring more debt, you take out a second mortgage or whatever. So I think it's important for us to be aware of how this cash flow influences things. Now, a couple different ways that we could keep track of it. One way, of course, is we could track our net worth over time and see what was our net worth at the beginning of the year versus the end of the year, and how has that evolved over time. And that would be an important thing to look at for sure, but it may not give us a true representation. In fact, it won't give us a true representation of what is actually going on here with the cash flow situation. Because if you think about this, for example, you could be adding more liabilities, you could be taking money out of your savings account, but if your home value, let's say, I'm going to make this kind of messy here, home value or your 401k balances or your other investments, if those investments are going up, you may not notice that as a net worth issue, because those things are growing maybe faster than the rate that you're adding liabilities, or growing at a faster rate than you're taking money out of your savings. So here's a couple quick things that you can do. Number one is, of course, you can start to track your expenses. And I think there's two components to this. One component would be to make sure you understand what those regular monthly obligations are, the things that happen every single month, and make some estimations. Of course, your heating bill, especially in Michigan here, is going to be higher in the wintertime than it is in the summertime, and your air conditioner or your electric bill is going to be higher in the summer. But try to normalize those things out, figure out about how much money you need for those regular monthly expenses, the groceries and all of that. And then also you want to be factoring in or thinking about what are those big expenses that you're going to have throughout the year. And maybe it's property taxes is one of those things. If you have tuition bills for your kids, or they're in sports and you know that, hey, in September my kids are going to be back in soccer, I got to write a check to the soccer club for that. And start making some estimations on what some of those other expenses are, and even start to think ahead on home improvement things. There's a lot of things. If you own a house, as you know, as I certainly know, there's things that always need to be done. So, hey, my house, this is true actually, my house actually needs a little bit of paint on the outside. So we've factored that in and said, hey, we've got a budget that we've set aside that we have for repainting some things on the outside of our house so we can maintain that. And you want to be doing those kinds of things. And home improvements are one of those things that could go up and down over time. So you want to be thinking about what those expenses are over time. So tracking those expenses would be one of the most important thing, and have an idea of where some of that money is going. The other thing you can do too is try to keep things relatively simple. I like to operate primarily out of one checking account for our entire household, and all of our bills kind of flow out of that. All of our income goes into that checking account, and so we can track the balance of that account over time. So even if you kind of spot check it here a little bit and say, what was that balance at the beginning of the year? Maybe check it every couple of months or so. And what was it mid-year? What was it at the end of the year? And you can tell a lot from what happens to that checking account. So if the checking account had a $20,000 balance at the beginning of the year, but only had $10,000 at the end of the year, then you know that you're taking out a little bit more cash flow than you have money coming in. There's more money coming out of that account. And then, of course, you want to also track the savings that you're doing too. And maybe that's the case. Maybe you did start the year at $20,000 and you finished the year at $10,000, but maybe you put $20,000 into your 401k plan at work, as an example. And so if that's the case, now you're actually, if you look at this and you do the math, you're actually $10,000 ahead on your cash flows. So those are the things that you want to understand and know the relationship of your cash flow versus your balance sheet, and what is this doing to your net worth. And hopefully over time, especially while you're working and you're in the accumulation phase, you want this net worth to be going up. For many people watching this, if you're in retirement, as you start to draw down some of your assets, it's not uncommon. It's not really a bad thing if your net worth starts to go down a little bit. That's why you save the money, so you could do all the fun things that you want to do in retirement. But understand that relationship. So we're going to continue this conversation throughout the rest of this week, and we're going to start to talk about maybe ways to improve this cash flow. How can we potentially improve the income that you have coming in? So we'll talk about some tips and strategies for that. We're also going to talk about expenses, and this is one thing I'm going to elaborate on here just for a second, because a lot of financial planners, or many financial planners, will oftentimes talk about, hey, if you've got a cash flow issue, maybe you've got some debt or some things that just aren't quite right, skip going out to dinner, cut back on, maybe if you go for coffee every morning, skip that. That's probably the most common one. People do that math and say, hey, if you just gave up your Starbucks every morning and you put that $3 or $4 away into a retirement account, by the time you're 60 years old, you'd have this big pile of money, or whatever. Well, what I like to do when I talk about expenses is look at what are the big things. I call them the big four. Taxes are one of those things, and we talk a lot about tax strategies here. How can we save more efficiently? How can we potentially reduce some of those taxes? That's one of the biggest expenses that we have. Housing is another one. Housing expenses for many people. Property taxes, how much are you spending on your mortgage, making smart decisions there. Debt is another one. My personal feelings on this is that if you have a mortgage on your house, I have rules on what kind of mortgage you should have, how much you should have relationship to your income on that. But credit cards, all those things, we want those paid off every month and try to be as debt-free as possible. So we'll talk about debt strategies. And then the last one is insurance. And I think there's a lot of people that don't necessarily put a lot of thought into their insurance. There's house insurance, your homeowner's policies, making good decisions there, your car insurance. But we also need to have life insurance, maybe disability insurance, and maybe reducing some of those things. And what I like about this in most cases here is that if we can reduce the expenses that you have there, that's going to go right to the bottom line of your cash flow, and it's going to really translate well into your balance sheet. And if we spend a little bit less money on taxes, or we pay a little bit more efficiently on our debt, reduce our insurance cost, that's going to be a positive. We're not changing our lifestyle to do that. Now, housing, of course, yeah, the bigger your house, maybe the more enjoyable that is, but we also want to keep that in check. We don't want to add unnecessary stress onto your life by having too big of a house payment or making decisions on your housing that just doesn't make sense for your income. So that's pretty much it for this video. Again, join me tomorrow for our next session, where we're going to get a little bit more of a deeper dive into some of these cash flow issues. And again, this all kind of goes together in what we refer to as the 7 core elements of retirement planning. So whether you're already retired, maybe if retirement's coming up here shortly in the next handful of years, or even if it's still 15 or 20 years off into the future, most of us, when we're talking about building this net worth and saving money, we're doing it probably so that we can one day stop working and do the things that we want to do in retirement. Go someplace warm for the winter, play more golf, take big trips and travel, spend time with your grandkids, whatever that is. And we want to try to help you improve that situation there. So again, those 7 core elements. Head on over to our resources section. We've got some great things over there at moneyevolution.com. And I will see everyone back here in tomorrow's video. Thanks.